JWINK Reviews here, and today I'm reviewing the LG OLED55C7P 4K Ultra HD OLED Smart TV. This is the 2017 model. Now, this is also the 55-inch model. They also make a 65-inch version of the same TV as well. Now, included with the TV is, as you can see there, the stand, which I've already got attached. Apologies in advance for having this on the floor because I'm planning on wall mounting that particular TV. But for the purposes of being able to show all the features, I wanted to have it sitting where it's easily accessible. But the stand is included with stand screws, a cable management accessory, the batteries for the remote, an instruction manual, the remote control, which I have there, a composite adapter cable, a stand cover plate. The attached power cord is approximately 6 feet long for those curious about that. As it seems to be a trend with TVs electronics these days, the included manual is terrible, as it's very brief, very little information. There's a better LG manual online on LG's website, but I as compared to other brands, I found their online manual a bit harder to navigate than some others. The TV itself also has an online manual built into it, similar to the LG setup, but again, it's a bit difficult to navigate while trying to set up the TV or solve an issue. Now, the included stand here, let me get up close, looks good. It's a metal stand. It's got the LG logo on the bottom right, which is hard to see, but it has a nice brushed metal design. It looks really nice. And it's solid and sturdy, but unfortunately, like a lot of stands, this doesn't swivel. It has a narrower stance than most, TVs, especially I have a 65-inch Samsung, which is a newer TV as well, and this has a smaller stance than that. Now, granted, this is a little bit smaller TV, but the way they've got it angled makes it take up a little bit less room. But if, space is an issue, then this, stand and this TV might be something that works better than larger or other TVs with different stands. The installation of the stand, I'll go back here to the back here, is pretty easy. Basically, it slides into a slot there with 4 screws. No big deal. Pretty easy to mount. Now, for me, I got this particular TV as a replacement for a 10-year-old Toshiba. And by far, the screen and the capabilities of this TV exceed that Toshiba. I have a Samsung's 4K TV that I'm going to do some comparisons to here that I got last year. As both of the brands have pros and cons, both the TVs have some pros and cons, but I found a deal with this particular TV this year, that came with a free Google Home speaker, which is the reason I got it, in addition to the price drop from when this originally came out. When TV first came out, it was over $3,000. Now it's around $1,600. So still pricey, but again, it's cheaper than when it was initially released. Design-wise, style, I really like the style. It's similar to the Samsung that I have, with a near bezel-less frame and sleek design. It's a nice looking TV overall, especially in comparison to my old Toshiba, which has a 2-inch frame around the screen. So, granted, things in 10 years have changed quite a bit in the realm of TVs. Although this particular TV I like a lot because it has a really thin screen. One of the things that kind of annoy me initially about this TV, it has a design that could be a lot better in comparison to the Samsung, which I think is a better overall design, mainly because of this. It has a 2-inch or so, or a little less, back here that holds all the ports and the power cord and all that, which kind of really, to me, ruins the thin design of the overall of the TV as compared to the Samsung that I have, which is thin all the way down and uses like a one connect box. I'm not a big fan of how they've designed this here, especially after having the Samsung. I just think it would have been a nicer design if they had done something similar, if they wanted, especially with creating such a thin TV. Now this particular area back here, again, is nearly 2 inches wide and about 13 inches in length there, and it of course spans the whole TV. The big thing with that really is you're not going to necessarily notice it when you have it, on a table or a stand or whatever. But to me, it makes wall mounting this a bit more difficult just because of how it's designed. And some wall mounts will not work for this TV. Although I do have some complaints about the Samsung's One Connect box. It has its own quirks. I think that would have been something similar to that would have been a better design feature for this TV. Now, as you can see here, this back area holds all of the 4 HDMI ports and USB ports here and here, the cable, the Ethernet, the composite port here, which the one advantage this TV has over the Samsung is they at least leave a legacy composite port and they provide an adapter. Although it's not a component adapter, it's a regular composite adapter, but at least if you have a legacy device, you can connect to this TV, unlike the Samsung. Also an optical port. The power cord is over on the other side. Now overall, the design is nice. I think the Samsung's cleaner back gives it a little bit of an advantage to the Samsung overall in terms of looks. Although this is a nice looking TV, has a good looking stand and all that. My one complaint about the Samsung versus this TV is the Samsung uses a magnetically attached power cable, which I don't like because it falls out too easy. LG goes for one that's securely in the back of the TV, which I'm fine with, especially with experiencing the issues with the magnetic power cord of the Samsung. Now, the initial setup with this particular TV is pretty simple and pretty easy, as it pretty much walks you through the initial connections, and the LG setup has some cartoon animation that kind of makes it fun to at least set up the TV. Pairing with the remote is pretty easy. It's a simple push of the button when the TV actually asks you to do so, and it connects up. Now, this TV, unlike the Samsung, I had network connection issues and firmware update issues. There was nothing like that with this TV. It smoothly connected to my network. I was able to update the firmware on the first try. And although I did find that the update is a bit slow to download and install. I'm going to bring up some of the setup here a little bit. The one thing I'm not particularly crazy about here with the setup are the icons. I'd rather them just be a little bit more just descriptive as opposed to icons. I'm not a big fan of that. Not a huge thing there, but with that. But in terms of setup, again, I always recommend with any electronic device to make sure you do the firmware update before you use anything else. Some initial reports of this TV had some sync issues with the audio. I didn't have that issue, but of course I didn't use this TV until after I did the firmware update. So the one odd thing about the firmware update with this though is that I found the automatic update. Let me go to it here. The automatic update of the TV was not checked for some reason. I don't know why that would not be checked to allow automatic updates on the initial setup. So make sure you check that so you get the updates. The current version that I'm using is 4.7036, which is the latest for this particular TV. So again, why that wasn't checked, I have no idea, but make sure you turn that on. Now, there was a slight issue with this TV connecting to my cable box. I currently don't have it connected to the cable box, but there was a slight issue. But I think that had to do with more with my cable box than the TV, as it had an issue once I plugged it back into the old TV, and I had to unplug the cable box and plug it back in to get it to connect. And once I did that, it worked fine with either TV. It was just a quirk of that particular cable box. But the TV itself determines your channel guide based on what service you use. You just kind of tell it. I kind of like Samsung's guide a little bit better than this one, as the guide here is a little plain, but it works, and it isn't a big deal. Samsung's OS is a bit fancier, I think, overall, than the OS that's on the TV for LG. But again, the Samsung setup was a bit more problematic. LG's initial setup is smoother and problem-free, and I had a better experience setting this TV up than I did with the Samsung. The one thing that I found with this TV versus the Samsung is I think that Samsung has a bit more advanced OS because it automatically detects devices that are connected to the HDMI ports, as you can see there. Whereas this TV, you have to actually label them yourself. I like the Samsung feature to automatically detect if it could. It didn't always work with older devices, but for the most part, it worked fine. Not a huge deal, but I kind of wish that LG had went that route with this. The app ribbon is fairly similar to Samsung's, but I think I like Samsung's organization a bit better than the LG ribbon, which I think is a bit crowded with the apps and could be a little bit better organized overall. And again, I'm not a fan of the symbols that are on some of these setup things as opposed to just having labels. But the OS is quick and responsive, though. You can go quickly to the content store or web browsing, that kind of stuff, with no issues. Like the Samsung, the LG is Bluetooth capable, and so you can connect headphones, tablets, and that kind of thing as well. Both TVs have one annoying feature that I do not like, and that's the flashing mute button here, which is on the right side of this TV. I kind of wish I could disable that, but the Samsung has something similar, which is annoying to me as well. As previously discussed, the ports on the back. All the 4 HDMI ports are HDMI 2.0 with one ARC. They're HDCP 2.2. The 3 USB ports, a composite video, an Ethernet port, an optical port, the cable, and RS-232 port. I think advantage is LG here versus the Samsung that I have, which has 4 HDMI ports, but only 2 of those are true HDMI with one ARC. The Samsung, again, lacks the composite like this TV has. This TV at least has one that's capable. Limited, but at least it's capable. Both TVs have the USB ports, of course, but it looks like LG is a little bit more limited on the different files formats that it can play. And I haven't played with that extensively versus the Samsung, but I do know Samsung has quite a bit more formats that it can play. So a slight advantage to the AG overall, but depending on your use for the USB ports, there may be some limitations there for you. Now, I want to get into a little bit on the remote control. I like LG's remote here a little bit better than the very simple Samsung, which has pretty much stripped most of the buttons away, except for some of the basic ones. LG here goes for a kind of more of a standard remote with basically most of the buttons that you would need for using the TV, not only as a universal remote, but just as a TV remote in general. The universal remote for Samsung is a bit easier to set up than this one, though. Whereas Samsung, you basically point the remote at the devices and it automatically syncs with those devices. And for the most part, it works pretty well. This has a little bit more complicated setup in the setup menu that you have to go into to set up each of the individual things that you want to control. It works, just not as smoothly probably as the Samsung. Now, the one thing I do not really like about this is as I wave this little moving pointer around is the pointer itself. I find it a bit annoying. Some people might like it. I don't really like this pointer feature. To me, it's kind of hard to hit what you want to hit at times. It makes it easy to miss. And I just don't really like it at all. I mean, to each their own personal preference, maybe. But for the most part, the remote works pretty well overall with the wheel control that it has. I just don't really like this pointer that's part of it. It frequently comes on when you don't want it to, and I'm just not a fan of the feature itself. Now, other than the power button on the remote, that is the only thing that lights up on the remote itself. It does not have backlighting, which makes it difficult to use in low light conditions. But again, there's a lot of remotes for brands TVs that have no backlighting either. But I kind of wish they would really add those features to these remotes. Like this particular, like the Samsung, this also has a microphone feature, and I found for the most part that it's more accurate and works smoother than the Samsung one I have. Maybe not as good as smartphones, but I think it works pretty well, at least from my initial uses of it. Unlike the flimsy feel of the Samsung remote, this has a bit sturdier feel and more solid, although it does have a bit of a plastic look, with its black, shiny plastic backing. I don't really like that. But overall, I think I like this remote better than Samsung's. App-wise, for the most part, most of the popular apps are there on the TV, and they work fairly smoothly. I'm using actually an app right now that has something called Live TV, which is something that LG has like 130 channels. So it works fairly smoothly across the network. The apps are responsive. I do think the selection of some of the apps are a bit limited as compared to Samsung and other brands. But, I mean, most of the popular ones are there. Really, if you're using a Blu-ray player, it tends to have most of the ones that you want to use. So whether that's a big deal, it's kind of up to how you use this TV. The ribbon cable, again, I think feels crowded. But the remote kind of helps make navigating through this a little bit easier. But I do think the Samsung TV has a few more apps and a bit better overall design of the ribbon cable. As good as Samsung's TV picture is with the TV that I have from last year, this LG picture quality is fantastic. It has the best contrast in color, including black levels that I've seen on a TV. The picture is very sharp, bright, colorful, handles motion well as any high-end TV should. There's no blurring that I can see. And it has a good picture from various viewing angles. Now, unlike my Samsung TV, I'm actually going to use this as a gaming TV as well. But I had no issues with that. It works well with my PS4 and with a beautiful screen and beautiful pictures on the games that I've tried. And it seems to handle that just fine. As with newer TVs, there's no 3D capability on this TV. But that's a feature I've never really found very useful in a TV, and most manufacturers seem to be going away from that feature. And again, Samsung's picture quality is great. But this LG gets the edge in overall picture quality because it's definitely gorgeous. I'm going to turn on the sound here. Now, I don't think that either TV's built-in sound will blow you away. I think the LG is okay. It has Dolby Atmos with it. Let me put it back on mute. But it's not going to blow you away. Neither is the Samsung. I'm personally going to use a soundbar with this TV to give it a sound that truly matches the picture. But I think the sound with this LG is a little underpowered overall. I have not experienced any issues with the sound audio not syncing to the picture. But again, I have the latest firmware with this as well. Warranty-wise, both TVs, the Samsung and the LG, have a 1-year warranty, which is pretty standard. And I've seen complaints about customer service for LG. I've not personally had to deal with their customer service, but I can also say, on the other hand, Samsung's, who I have dealt with, their customer service is not that great either. So, you know, that's just pretty much standard in the industry, I think. Now, overall, again, I think this is a nice-looking TV with its near bezel-less design. It has the best-looking picture quality I've seen so far in a TV, with great contrast, color, and black levels, good upscaling, fast refresh rate. The remote control has most of the needed buttons and a decent layout. It's easy to use remote to navigate for the most part. It's Bluetooth capable. The apps are smooth and responsive. Initial setup is easy and pain-free. It has a really nice looking metal stand. The OS runs quickly and smoothly. It has a number of ports that are helpful, even a legacy composite. Good voice recognition. Most of the apps that are popular on there, it interfaces with your cable guide, which is good. And it works well for TV, streaming, and gaming. Again, on the other hand, the cons with this is the app ribbon's a bit crowded. The audio is okay, but underpowered. Slow initial startup when you're first setting this thing up. The printed manual stinks. The stand doesn't swivel. The firmware update is a bit slow to download and update. The online manual and TV manual's a bit cumbersome to use. The universal remote setup is not as smooth as Samsung's process. The remote could look a bit nicer with its shiny plastic. The remote pointer feature I don't really like that much. Apps are a bit limited in comparison to other brands. There's no backlighting on the remote. No 3D if that's important to you. I don't like the flashing mute icon. The file format for USB devices is limited. I don't like the ugly white port area that sticks out about 2 inches. I think some design similar to what Samsung does with a separate box might have been a better choice. Wall mounting can be a bit difficult with some wall mounts because of that design. There's no automatic HDMI detection. Some icons could be labeled a bit better and a bit better organized. And it's pricey, but it has gone down in the last 12 months. So, although there's some cons to this TV, the most important part of this TV, the picture's great. Some features could be designed a bit better, such as the back area of the TV, and there could be some additional apps and features that other brands have that this one lacks. But overall, I like this TV. It has an awesome picture. It has okay sound, which the picture, again, is the most important thing. I give it 4 stars.